again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. Public and private sectors, they occasionally meet. They do on this program anyway. Michael Hiblin joins us from KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas, where he's news director. Price Dooley on the political science faculty at the University of Central Arkansas. Lance Turner is a reporter and columnist for Arkansas Business. It remains the dominant story as it was last week, and that's the Medicaid situation with the General Assembly sitting next week. 135 members, a substantial number of new members, and some polite, but still how pronounced. It's not clear how pronounced differences between the House and Senate leadership, GOP for the first time, both, and the Beebe administration. Do we know?
Everybody is sounding really optimistic and a lot of goodwill and sounding a lot of positive notes, I guess, ahead of this session, which is sort of interesting. So it's been hard for me personally to sort of gauge where everyone exactly is. But I think, obviously as the session goes on and as we actually start seeing legislation, we'll sort of know where everyone stands. But it's been kind of striking that everyone seems to be, even the governor seems optimistic that they can get, Medicaid done in this session. Even while I think when listening to the Republicans the other day, Davy Carter and Michael Lamoureux had sort of they all previewed sort of what they were going to do this session earlier this week, and they sort of while they sound very willing to talk and discuss on Medicaid and deal and try to find a good compromise for everything, they seem really cautious and really willing to take it slow. And that's where I wonder where we might get some friction is how slow are they going to take it and how thorough are they going to be in asking questions and gathering information. And so can we get it done in this session? And a lot hinges on getting Medicaid done before we can do a lot of other things.
And one detail we're learning at this point, they at least are saying they don't think they will need to make cuts to Medicaid in the coming year. And that's big. We're facing a shortfall of, it's expected to be about $300 million by 2014. And they are thinking they can use some of the surplus money and avoid actually having to make any of the cuts that many have been fearing.
Which Mr. Beebe has said, yeah, a little of the surplus, not all of it, but a little could go into that formula.
That's going to resolve the issue, I guess, for the next year or so. But I think the issue, though, is ultimately
sustainability.
Does Arkansas actually go ahead and opt in for the Medicaid expansion? Now, there have been a number of arguments as it relates to that in terms of, well, you can go and expand and cover more Arkansans, low and working class Arkansans would be helpful from that standpoint. There's another argument that also is out there. Maybe the business community could kind of weigh in on that, in that if we expand Medicaid coverage, then there are a number of Arkansans that actually rise to that 133% of poverty that are working full time. And that would actually reduce the liability for large-scale employers, a la Walmart, here in Arkansas. And so there should be that added, I think, incentive or pressure from that standpoint, I think, to get that expansion done. Because if it's really about shoring up the Medicaid system and not sort of this kind of ideological kind of fight, then Arkansas as a state that actually receives more funding from the national government for every dollar we actually spend on Medicaid, every dollar that we actually send to the national government in our taxes, we get about $1.06 back. So from that standpoint, it just seems, as a poor state, we could go ahead and do that.
Lance, do we know where business, obviously the clinical community, elements of the clinical community have spoken loudly in behalf of expansion. Do we know where the business community writ large?
I don't know that we know entirely just yet. When it comes down to dollars and cents, I mean, that'll be the deciding factor. And like you say, when you're making that case, it seems almost like a layup that you would opt for Republicans are a little hemmed in because, apparently, the federal government has said it's all or nothing on this expansion. And so that's sort of the interesting position that they're in, is that they're wanting to find this alternate solution that they might not be able to make happen just because the federal government says, you expand it to everyone or you don't expand it at all. And even with Beebe saying, yeah, I'll talk to the federal government about what else we can do, but he's doubtful that they'll give them that leeway.
Yeah, but we still keep hearing the arguments from people like Joe Thompson, the Surgeon General, that this expanding Medicaid would be vital for the small hospitals in the state, and that if they don't do this, and Republicans don't want to do anything to show any support for Obamacare in any way, but that this will have such a negative impact on these small hospitals in the state.
With Walmart, what Walmart is saying, and we'll talk a little bit more about, I guess, about what Walmart has gotten involved in, but they think that it'll, in terms of them being a self-provider or self-insurer, they can save quite a bit of money, under an expansion and under some other things that we're trying to do to fix Medicaid and how we pay for services in Arkansas.
Lance mentioned that there seemed to be a spirit or an optimistic synergy between Mr. Beebe and Mr. Carter, for example. Oh, but I hate to toss this in. Speaker Boehner and President Obama seemed so hopeful that they were so close to a grand bargain, and Mr. Boehner turned around and found he'd lost his conference. Mr. Carter, assuming some kind of grand, semi-grand, mini-grand bargain is in the works between he, Mr. Lamoureux, and the governor. Mr. Lamoureux and Mr. Carter, have to bring their conferences along. They have, certainly Mr. Lamoureux has a control in the Senate, or the GOP did.
I think that remains sort of the unknown. I mean, certainly if you follow some of these Republican legislators on Twitter, as some of us are forced to do or have to do, you hear a lot of opposition to any kind of expansion all the time. There's a lot of no going on. So, once they get in there and start voting and start, trying to make policy, that's, where the rubber meets the road, as the cliche goes, that's when we're going to see, how well they can bring those constituencies along and what those constituencies will bring to bear on Carter and Lamoureux to go to the governor with, to what degree can they, set the tone and make them fall in line with what they want to do. So.
Yeah. Price, you see an ideological bloodbath here, or will it be somewhat less than that?
I think particularly in the Senate. I mean, you've already brought that up. You're looking at 60%, right, of Republican kind of control in the Senate, versus the numbers are far more narrow in the House. So I think something could kind of come out of the House. You actually saw, of course, David Carter as sort of the compromise speaker. Wasn't the person who, I think, Terry Wright was the person initially going in that everyone thought was going to be the Republican speaker. So there's already sort of compromise afoot there and the ability to go ahead and work across party lines in the House. In the Senate, though, again, that's problematic. And I personally, I don't think anyone quite knows yet in terms of what's going to happen. So I totally agree with you, Lance, on that. I guess fundamentally, though, it's sort of an issue from the perspective of, do you really, are Republicans in a poor state going to go ahead and reject a program that's going to benefit a vast majority of Arkansans and kind of turn the state's balance sheet around? I mean, it doesn't make any physical sense from that standpoint. I mean, just objectively looking at it. So I'm not sure.
Worth a mention, too, that Mr. Carter, it is rumored, harbors ambitions beyond the General Assembly of Arkansas. It would appear to be, if that is the case, it would appear to be in his interest to have as seamless a session, as polite, as effective a session as possible without losing the Republican base.
And he's focusing completely on doing that. He has a full-time job as a president with Centennial Bank, and yesterday he announced that he's leaving that job to focus completely and full-time on the session coming up. So he's committed to making something happen, that's for sure.
You mentioned, Lance, Walmart, very much in the news on a number of things. First of all, it wrote a big check, or has pledged a big check.
That's right, $670,000 to work with the state on how Arkansas is changing how private insurers and Medicaid pays for health care. Arkansas is sort of a pioneer, or is a pioneer, in changing how we do that. We want to go from a fee-for-service payment system to sort of a fee for episode or payment per episode of care. So rather than every single nickel and dime thing you go in and have done, you take the sort of a holistic approach from the entire episode of care from incident to resolution. And so Walmart is getting behind that initiative. It's putting all 57,000 of its Arkansas employees behind that initiative here in Arkansas, and it's pledged some money toward that end, in part to create a tracking system that will sort of monitor all of these outcomes and help amass some data to sort of track how this payment system is working out. So it's a good vote of confidence from the world's largest retailer. It's a good retailer to have in your pocket as you're trying to sell how this is going to work out, and a good way to sort of get it off the ground to really track how well you've set your price targets for episodes of care as well, because you're gonna either reward or punish healthcare providers based on how efficiently they can provide care. So,
Clinical community is still taking a somewhat wary eye on this.
certainly, and you can, yeah, I mean, you're going to have somebody kind of up in your business a little bit with how you provide care, but the goal is more efficiency and better outcomes, and so. Yeah, it's good to have Walmart, at least pushing that.
Yeah, the governor was very excited about this, along with the Surgeon General yesterday at the press conference announcing this, to have someone like Walmart, the world's largest retailer, getting on board with this, putting this kind of money into it, as Arkansas is just in the first phase. It's a good step as they get this payment improvement initiative started.
Another aspect to Walmart, at first it appeared to ignore the gun control thing in what Walmart, obviously a huge seller of firearms. Mm-hmm. It changed its mind and agreed to take a seat at the vice president's table, which is the president's table, let's face it, on the gun control issue this week. Price?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I think initially Walmart kind of sort of cited the fact that they didn't, an executive wasn't available to actually go and attend the session when they initially got the invitation. Get a lot of backlash from that. And then decided to go ahead and make an appropriate level executive available for that. And so they attended Vice President Biden's gun roundtable, I think, yesterday. It's interesting to see what the outcome of this is going to be. If I think in some quarters are talking about an assault weapons outright ban, that's not going to go through the House at all, the Republican-controlled House. They're probably going to go ahead and focus on maybe more moderate types of things from the perspective of universal background checks, maybe closing the loophole at gun shows, maybe doing something as it relates to these high-capacity rounds, outlawing the 30 count of those. But that might even be problematic. So it's interesting that the president has said he's going to go ahead and really utilize a lot of his political capital to go ahead and get something done here in the next couple of months. It's going to be in the State of the Union address. He's going to talk about that. I'm not really sure if anything substantive is actually going to go ahead and pass. I think they've also talked about like mental health in terms of maybe exploring that. But then that's sort of from a monetary perspective, from a budgetary perspective, it's
going to cost money.
It's a lot, and probably to the extent in our environment where we're borrowing 40 cents out, on each dollar. I don't see how we're going to do another expansion of the medical perspective. So I don't see where this is going to go.
Guys?
I heard talk that we could even hear a rough outline of the proposals, what the vice president wants to see as early as next week.
Tuesday, I think.
It's coming together very fast. Walmart is,
moves fast.
I think, the biggest retailer of guns in America. And they've sort of gone back and forth. There was a period where they sort of stopped selling guns for a while. Some of it was part of their goals for their inventory mix, but they've come back to that recently, and that AR-15 Bushmaster had been on sale at Walmart. I think they took that particular model off, but you can buy some weaponry at Walmart.
Well, then another aspect to the Walmart agenda this week, the New York Times has been some exhaustive reporting on Walmart's dealings in Mexico, flat asserting that the company was actively engaged in bribing Mexican officials to get its preferences on store locations, etc. And I won't say it's muted, but it's been very careful, the response from Walmart thus far. And Mr. Waxman of California argued this week that his committee had documents which indicated that, contrary to what Walmart has indicated before, knowledge of this did extend to the upper reaches, top reaches of the executive suite.
Mike Duke in 2005 apparently had known or had been presented with knowledge of bribery in Mexico. And Walmart's statement yesterday was sort of, you're right, it was a little muted, but they also said, this stuff really doesn't contradict what we've said in terms of the timeline. So they'll bicker over points in the timeline, but the broad strokes are, the allegations are that yes, people at the very top of Walmart, Lee Scott, going back into his era, knew that bribery was taking place in Mexico at least, but Walmart, which has since launched an internal probe, they had launched an internal probe and then had sort of allegedly quietly dismissed it, but then brought it back after the Times reported back in the spring on this issue. Walmart has launched another internal investigation, and now they're looking in Brazil, and they're looking in India, and in some other places, across the globe. And so, this is a serious issue that Congress is looking at and Walmart's looking at internally. There's already been some disciplinary action taking place in India. And this latest Times report, which is sort of over the holidays, looked at a specific instance in Mexico where they paid thousands of dollars to get a store built near or on a sort of an ancient burial site in Mexico, and very much used their influence there. So yeah, it's serious and it's real, and it continues.
All right, on to some local, under the broad rubric of ethics, there's going to be an initiative, Michael, on the ballot, apparently, or at least it's certified by the AG.
Yeah, the Attorney General's office has certified the language and given the go-ahead for another effort to put this ethics reform proposal on the ballot. The Rinyut Populace group had been working to get signatures. They failed last year in getting it on the general election ballot, didn't get enough signatures, but it really has been a grassroots effort by a lot of people to get this kind of measure passed. It would ban the kind of gifts that you can give to lobbyists. It would expand the amount of time lawmakers have to wait before they can then become lobbyists. There's also talk maybe the legislature might take some action. Two members of the legislature have said they're going to propose their own ethics reform measures. But one way or another, we are likely to see something, at least get some consideration. Whether or not they'll be able to get the 62,000 signatures needed to get it on the vote, we'll see.
Direct corporate contributions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of limitations here.
Is this sort of modeled on the Walmart kind of what they say is in terms of the strictness of it, the cup of coffee rule or whatever?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, but I believe this is pretty much an outright ban of gifts. And I think even for the, meals. And yeah, taking, like Walmart, taking a much stronger approach to try to avoid any kind of influence.
Price, time, right?
Extraordinarily popular with Arkansans. I mean, I think in a previous poll when they were trying to go and collect those signatures, over 60% of Arkansans were in support of some form of ethics reform with our legislature and government. So from that perspective, if it can get on the ballot, it will pass.
Lance, Arkansas Business, with more on the woes of the state treasurer already under the gun, so to speak.
That's right, yeah, and what Arkansas Business reported this week is we had learned, talking to sources, that apparently Martha Schaffner, the state treasurer, had been under a criminal probe for more than a year by the time that she had appeared last month before that legislative joint auditing committee, which ended up referring some of their findings to authorities here in Arkansas. But yeah, the broad strokes of that is that she, I think while people have been pressing for an investigation, come to find out she had already been the subject of an investigation.
And we should back up. We're talking about bond trades carried out.
That's right. Yeah. So the scrutiny with her has been, her office's, work in trading bonds, and whether she might have showed some favoritism to just a couple of bond traders, or one really connected to Steele Stevens and his son, or rather Steve Stevens and his son Steele, and whether those bond trades were necessary. There was an economic or a lost opportunity of profit out of these bonds. They didn't make as much money as people thought they should have, and so the allegations here are that she, pushed a lot of business, more than she should have, toward these bond traders because she was showing favoritism, which she denies.
Yeah.
And so the FBI apparently involved in some of this, interviewing sources that we talked to about these trades, but also looking at Martha Schaffner's political contributions to her political campaign to run for office. And she's sort of had these issues before with properly accounting for the contributions to her campaign. So looking at both of those issues. She couldn't be reached for comment for our story. The FBI, of course, doesn't confirm or deny whether they're involved in any investigation ever. But we do know that a state auditor sort of confirmed our report later this week, saying yes, someone in his office had been contacted by investigators looking at her. And then also this week, the Board of Finance voted to hire a consultant to take an even closer look at some of her bond trades. So a lot of smoke, a lot of scrutiny in her office these days, definitely.
But no formal allegations of wrongdoing. Judgment has been questioned, but no criminal.
Exactly right. A lot of evidence gathering, and there's the thought too that these hearings at which she is under oath, before this committee, is sort of a shadow extension of some of this investigation. To sort of bring her in and get her under oath and make her say things, and that we can use as part of our investigation. That's sort of the underlying some of the whispers that we've heard as well.
A man who would be the Democratic gubernatorial nominee, the front runner, Price, this week came out, had a news conference about a personal indiscretion, and much of the state read or watched.
Oh yeah.
The Attorney General, Mr. McDaniel.
I think that was kind of an extraordinary kind of thing to go ahead and do from this perspective. But it's something for him to go ahead and get sort of maybe behind him for the upcoming 2014 gubernatorial campaign to start that. I think the press had a series of questions they wanted to go ahead and ask him, and so hopefully he was able to go ahead and kind of touch on some of those things and kind of get that passed. The Arkansans have a very, very short attention span, so I think it's the hope of the Attorney General that after this blows over, assuming there's no more allegations that come forward, there's no more discretions that are out there, that in the latter half of this year, that he can just move forward with his campaign.
Not an afternoon had passed before the attorney in Hot Springs, with whom the relationship occurred, vowed essentially to tell her side of the story and suggested it might not comport entirely with the Attorney General's mind.
Yeah, Andy Davis sent emails to several news organizations saying that what Dustin McDaniel said, a lot of it was half-truths. There are also 500 texts that McDaniel and Davis sent back and forth, which are in the hands of investigators. Nothing to do with the relationship, but because there was a murder at the attorney's home. And as part of the investigation into that, they also have McDaniel's texts.
Well, we should say a killing.
A killing, yes,
Yeah.
right. There was a killing. But McDaniel was asked at that press conference, will you release these texts? And he said no, that they're on my personal phone, that he doesn't even have records of them, but police apparently did get the records of them. But this, it took 3 weeks before McDaniel first acknowledged this relationship, before he actually appeared in public, was practically in hiding with no public appearances, not speaking directly with reporters. So if he is, and he is still intending to run for governor, he had to finally get out there, acknowledge that, apologize for it, but also said there are no other shoes that are going to fall. There were rumors circulating that there might have been other women, and he said there is nothing else that is going to come out of this. Had his wife there at the press conference. They hugged at the end. And he really has to hope that this is the end of it.
Short time remaining, but the gentleman who sits now for the 4th Congressional District, making quite a name for himself in Washington, that would be Mr. Cotton.
That's right. No.
Hard right and no apologies.
Right. No. And so no on Sandy assistance, no on some disaster assistance here in Arkansas, or not included in the news release that the delegation sent out. Unclear as to whether he is for that. No on women in the infantry in the military, and no on Chuck Hagel, of course, which has sort of been his main campaign lately. So Yeah, he's making a splash. You know, he's most likely to succeed. Voted, going into this legislature, and but yeah, I think the 4th District, should pay attention because he's quickly amassing a record in just not even a full month into the session.
Yeah, certainly his colleagues are.
Yeah, this
Beltway crowd.
It won't help him, I think, among the farmers. 61 counties, it was a disaster declaration for farmers and ranchers and allowed these people to apply for assistance. And I was really struck. Here's the press release, and normally when you get these, you've got all 6 of our members of the congressional delegation there, and I immediately noticed, wait a minute, Tom Cotton is not listed on here. And I guess maybe it would have been seen as hypocritical having just turned down Sandy money for that if he had then turned around and said, well, for Arkansas, that's different. So, but yeah, as you say, Lance, no word whether or not he actually opposed this, but he was just not here included in the press release.
And to be fair, he's been, whatever we spend, we need to make sure we cut elsewhere because we're in this deficit situation.
Consistent.
So that's been his position, and it appears that he's sticking with it.
And we have to end it there because we're out of time. Gents, thanks to you for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. And we'll see you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.